everything else. And in this case, the Liberal government has definitely tried everything else to avoid action on foreign interference over 9 years. But with C-70, they've finally responded to pressure from the opposition and from the public. Conservatives don't want to let the government get away with sitting on this bill. After 9 years, we've had enough delays. We will push for anti-interference measures to be passed and in place as soon as possible. Now, one important flashpoint for the foreign interference conversation is Hong Kong, because Hong Kong's national security law makes absurd claims of universal jurisdiction, even claiming that if a Canadian in Canada makes statements that are deemed to violate Hong Kong's national security law, they could be charged and even rendered to Hong Kong while traveling in a third country. The manager of Hong Kong's Economic and Trade Office in London has been charged with spying. I've heard concerns from the Canadian Hong Kong community about the activities of the ETO in Canada. Hong Kong is no longer meaningfully separate from the mainland, which raises questions about whether these offices have any legitimacy anyways. So is the government reviewing the activities of the ETO as they relate to foreign interference?
Mr. Chair, this would be a question that would be better addressed by Global Affairs Canada.
Okay, no officials have a response on that? Okay, I would welcome a response in writing if you're able to communicate with your counterparts, because I do think it's relevant to our work today. I have a specific question for CSIS about a personal example and information sharing. As you know, my personal email was targeted as a result of my involvement with the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. The Government of Canada did not have my back. They didn't tell me about this threat or how I could protect myself. I'm a vocal member of the opposition, often critical of the government, and the government didn't report the information to me in a way that would have helped me protect myself from foreign interference. The government didn't have my back, but our institutions should have. But unfortunately, CSIS did not have the legal authority to share information directly with me as per the current law. If the changes of this bill had been in place, using my experience as an example, would CSIS have had the authority and been able to simply communicate directly with me right away about these threats and what I could do about them?
I think there's a specific question about the incident itself, and clarity needs to be provided a little bit insofar as the service is not the lead for cybersecurity for the Government of Canada, and I think this issue is relevant to another committee study, so I won't address that specific fact. But on the broader question around information sharing, certainly the service has some significant limitations in the disclosure of information collected in its duties and functions with anyone outside the federal government beyond law enforcement effectively. And so with amendments in the Act, there would be a clear authority to engage outside the federal government for the purpose of building resiliency to threats. And that could be an early, preventative, proactive kind of disclosure of information informed by our investigations. Where information has a personal or private element, the minister would determine that information could be disclosed if it was in the public interest. I don't want to really speculate on a specific scenario such as this one with hindsight, but I do think this would improve our ability to engage.
I understand, but just to drill down, so if there was a threat to me as an opposition member of Parliament that you became aware of, it sounds like even after this bill is passed, you would need the minister's determination that telling me was in the public interest before you could tell me. You wouldn't have the discretion to say, Mr. Genis needs this information right away because it's relevant to his life.
I would correct that presumption. In fact, the service, if there were a manifest threat occurring under its threat reduction mandate today, it could disclose information for the purpose of reducing a threat when the threat is unfolding, active. The amendments in the bill do something different. They enable an earlier and broader engagement for the purpose of building resiliency to threats before the threat
with
is
ministerial
real.
consent, though, or not?
No. No ministerial consent required.
Okay.
But no disclosure of personal information.
Okay. That seems like a gap to me, but I'll go on to one more thing here. Just following my general skepticism about the government's will to address this, why the requirement of Attorney General consent, and what would happen in the case where the Attorney General might be in a conflict of interest, such as where the Attorney General might have personally benefited from foreign interference in his or her own riding?
Thank you for the question. The requirement of Attorney General consent already exists in the SOIA, and so the new offences which would be integrated into the SOIA, would that requirement would continue to apply. In general, the requirement of Attorney General consent applies to ensure that there is the proper assessment of the key elements of whether there's a reasonable prospect of conviction and the public interest in proceeding with a prosecution, that assessment is taken at appropriate level given the context of the interests at stake. And in practice, in our system, that Attorney General consent is usually exercised by the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Thank you, Mr. Dennis.